these are my runs in reverse order after the modification. So after the modification, it's a 355. Before that, it was a 365. And you can compare the information here at the speed. So the very last one was definitely the fastest run. Now this is with a Tekin RX8 ESC and a Trinity 13.5 turn motor at 52 degrees approximately in the end bell, which is actually about 55 or 56 degrees in actual timing. The other thing too is it has a 25 tooth pinion stock spur. Now the DR10 you can consistently do 410, 409, 410, but that's with the smaller stock pinion, which I believe is an 18. I have to check. But this is the second run, so notice the second run time is the same as the third run, so very consistent there. And this was the very first run. So the very first run was a 360. So I went from 360, 365, 365 to 355. And I'm so confident in this car after the modification that in that very first clip, as soon as you started watching this video, I ran it away and then I decided to just run it back. Keep in mind that my wife is in that little middle lane, so that white stretch of patch, that's about a 1.20 m. So it's about a 4-foot white patch. So notice how the car stays within that 1.20 m, those 4 feet. And that's something else to keep in mind. I mean, some guys will be running these slow times. I mean, they're not that slow. They're slow. 365, but they're all over the place as they take off. And I'm so confident in this car that I decided to just drive it back. And I miss her by, say, a foot's length. Now I knew I wasn't going to hit her. That's how confident I was. Now here's the thing. Recommendation. If your wife is nice and doesn't cut your RC budget and she's also your cameraman, such as my wife is my cameraman, don't risk hitting your wife with your RC, especially when the thing goes over 50 kilometers per hour and she is crouching down trying to get a nicer video of your RC. Just pointing that out. So don't risk it, but again, I had so much confidence in this car that I decided to just go for it. And you can see how nicely it tracks. And I'm going to go ahead and show it again and pay attention to that lighter part of the asphalt. That's about a 1.20 m in width, which is about 4 feet. So let me go ahead and show it to you. All right, so it's this patch of lighter asphalt. Notice that. That's what I'm referring to. That's about a 1.20 m, which is about 4 feet, and that's generally what I use as a lane for reference to see how the cars are tracking. And this is how close I get to my wife right here. There. And now for the modification. This gauge is 14 millimeters, and then as you turn it, every click is 1 millimeter. So it's 14 millimeters as it is. If I go to here, see it's right to the line. So it's 14 millimeters minus whatever the chassis is in the rear. So that's the rear height if I measure here. Now, if you have a vehicle that's worn out here in the back, you do not want to measure there. I'm doing this because my vehicle doesn't hit the ground because of those spacers limiters. Now, if you already watched my build video, that's a recommendation that I do. So these are the 440 nylon spacers. So that's the first must upgrade for this vehicle. So put 6 in the rear. Now, if we go to the front end of the vehicle, here's the 14. Yeah, the front end doesn't care. It's so high off the ground. I mean, this thing doesn't even touch. So we're gonna go ahead and just click this up. And we go 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, right here. And let's see if you can see. Yeah, the bumper's kind of in the way, but anyway, this thing's not even touching. So much space. Let me go ahead and rotate the vehicle. I mean, you can see that it's raked toward the back. That's very obvious. Now, you can see the giant gap. It's right underneath, and you can see there's a ton of space. Forget about this part over here. But anyway, let's see, so 22, all right, so it's about 22 right there, that's where it stops. So it's really high in the front compared to the DR10. The DR10 sits pretty low. So what I'm gonna do real quick is I'm going to go ahead and replace the front shock tower with a DR10. All right, so this is the DR10M. Let's see, where should I go? I think the best place to measure might be, I'll go from here. So I'll just go top of this hole, top of this hole. So that'll give me center. So these are approximations. All right, it's about 5172 from this one to this one. And I'm using this measurement. So the reason why I'm using this measurement is because it's just easier. This is where it's going to mount. This is where the shock's going to be at its highest position. Now, just for fun, I'll measure bottom to bottom of this one. I'll go across. It's about 68.4 from that measurement to this measurement. Not really that it matters, but these holes, these are the same. These will line up. The difference is where it mounts. So if we go back to, let's see, so we're zeroed. This is the DR10, the regular DR10. So I'm gonna go bottom to top. And I'll just go bottom to bottom. So we're looking at 6622. So it's much larger, significantly larger. Now we're gonna go across. And originally, let's see, just to remember, I think it was 68, close to that. Yeah, it was about 68. So here, we'll go bottom to bottom. Again, approximation. We're looking at 80. So that's over a centimeter going across. So height-wise, I mean, I could measure the height, I guess. I don't guess, I know I can. Well, this is an approximation, right, because these things are moving. Okay. So a way that you can measure the height, just grab two boards like this, place them here, and then put the calipers. Let me do that real quick. All right, so this will be close enough. I want to go to the bottom. That's about 63.5 minus minus 5.4 roughly. Wait, no, hold on. 0.2, so minus 5.2. Now, compared to this one, let me zero this out. Oops, turned it off. All right, we'll do the same thing. It's about 77 minus the same 5.2. So we're looking at, let's just say 72, rounded off. So there's a significant difference between the two. So right now, those spacers are blue, these spacers are black. They're actually a different size. So I'm going to swap these out as well. And let's go ahead and install them. All right, so the next upgrade, other than that, will be the shafts. So these shafts, these are the shafts off of a buggy. So this is a B63 rear shock. I think all the buggies have the same rear shafts. Now, I don't remember the actual measurement, but I'll try to find the part number and put it in the description. But just so you know, total length is 47.8. If I do the length right here in the middle, that's 38.5. 47.2. So I'm not sure if they consider these 38s. All right, so there's the other shaft. So you can see them side by side. So again, this one's 48 total, well, 47.8. This one is 42.3. So before the front end, the 19 gauge wouldn't even touch, it wouldn't come close. 19 was somewhere over here in the center. So if we grab the 19 now, notice the right height. And this is with the DR10 front shock tower and front shocks. Now in there you can see the nylon spacers. Now those are dirty because I was running them in the DR10. I actually just removed them to use them as comparison. But those are seven nylon spacers or washers that I have in there. Those are the 440s, and see, the car won't hit. So you can get away with 6 based on this, but I would leave the 7, not for the chassis, but for the body. Just that front splitter doesn't rub on the asphalt all the time. And now look at that. So the chassis is now less than 14 in the front. I would have to use a different ride height gauge, but it looks like it might be 13, maybe 12.5. Might be 12, to be honest. But that is a massive difference compared to before. Now look at how much flatter the chassis looks compared to before. Before this thing was raked. Here, let me go ahead and set this all the way to the top. And then we'll pretend this is a before and after. Well, this would be the after. That's what it looks like. And then before, this gauge used to be able to sit right there. So that's the before, after. Great improvement. Now, usually if you mess around with the front height, it also messes with the rear. So the rear, we went lower on the front. The rear might be a little higher. Let's see. So go ahead and close this. And it is a little higher. As you can see, the gauge, this gauge used to be right at that line between the blue and the black. Now it's just below the center part of the chassis. So it is going to rake the rear up just a bit, but it's a trade-off that's worth it. And again, the spacers work well. If you want to remove one, you don't have to add the full 6. You could probably get away with 5 if your goal is for this simply not to rub now that you've replaced the front shocks. So again, this is the front shock tower and the front shocks off of a DR10. The other thing to notice as well is the following. So there it is all the way down, and let's look at the droop. All right, right about there. So you'll still have some steering as the car accelerates up until about that height. Massive improvement. All right, so the ones to get are actually these here. So I've found these in my parts bin. Again, I have a ton of these. They come with the other kits. Again, I don't have a part number offhand, but this is the difference between them. So the original, again, full length, which is really what matters, 17.3 versus 21, it's 21.2. So it's 4 millimeters. Let's just run it to 4 millimeter difference. That's what you want to increase this by. And the reason why this works is because the shafts are longer. So if you think about it, these are actually the shafts that go in the rear shocks of the buggy B6. Now they are the same as the front of the DR10. Now I actually reinstalled the shafts, but the shafts are shorter on the DR10M. So the way that you add the length back is by replacing the end link with a longer end link. And that gives you the 4 millimeters.
So this is really the least expensive way to go. Just go with this. Now keep in mind that the actual shock body is shorter. I can't remember, I believe it's 2 millimeters shorter. So you're still going to be off by 2 millimeters, but it's the least expensive way to go. Now in my case, because I already have these shafts and I have the little screws and washers because I have the other vehicles, I just need to buy pistons. I just don't have any pistons. If I bought the pistons, I could just use those shafts. And so the reason why I would actually prefer these shafts is because they're longer, so then I can decide whether to limit them or not. But this works, and honestly, the overall length is the same. So even though I would still prefer these, it doesn't really make sense from an economic perspective or measurements. Why? Because these shafts with this will give me the length, plus I'm adding spacers, limiters here to limit the amount of droop. So really, these short shafts with this is good enough, but it's up to you. This is actually the least expensive option. Now that I think about it, this is the way to go. I sort of had to hear it, I guess, in order to make up my mind. So I'm going to go ahead and install these and then measure everything and see how the height of this vehicle compares to the using the DR10 shocks in this DR10M. All right, and here it is. This is what it looks like. So let me go ahead and turn this around. And let's go ahead and have this view. See? Oh, that's pretty low. Which is a good thing. It actually sits just like the other one, if I'm not mistaken. Because this is 14, and it looks like it is about a millimeter lower, so it's about 13 right there at that spot, which I believe that's where I had measured the other one. So this actually works. It's I would say the perfect length, given how horrible the stock is, or the out of the box when you build it. Let's see. So now that's the droop. I still think the other shocks might be a little better, and the reason why is the shock bodies are actually a little longer. They are, I believe, 2 millimeters longer. So you're losing about 2 millimeters in droop, but it's still far better than it was before. It was way too high in the front end. So those are some of the options, some of the fixes. Again, this is a DR10 shock tire and this DR10M. So replace the shock tire, it's a direct fit. And then the shocks, just replace those rod ends for the slightly longer ones. I forgot, I think it was 4 millimeter difference. Don't have the part number, but if you just look at the rod ends, they come in a pack usually in a little parts tree. So you can just buy the spur and take the parts off. Or you can get the DR10 shocks in the front, but they will not be threaded. Or you can buy the whole shocks for a B6, the rear shocks. That's going to be about $100. I mean, those are your options. The other thing too is you can get just the shock bodies and the links. These links, I have no idea. Maybe they're about $10 for the whole pack. The shock bodies are going to be about $30 for the shock bodies, but I would recommend replacing the shock bodies, although it may not really matter. Maybe you don't want that much droop. It's only 2 millimeters after all. All right, here we go. So this block, this is 1 centimeter in height. So I have the DR10M right here. So those are the shocks with the rod ends. The other thing too is I put 3, I don't know if you can see them, but there's those nylon washers in there, those white ones. I put 3 of them, and 3 of them will keep this from bottoming out. So those are 1.5 millimeters each. But right here I have the DR10. So if I take this millimeter block, now I'm going to drive this. Oops, there goes my other gauge. And actually it hits right there. So that's the hinge pin for the arm. So over here it's fine, but then it gets to there and it hits. So this is right at the hinge pin. It's lower than 1 centimeter or 10 millimeters. This is my lower gauge. This one only goes to 7. That's why I didn't use this one. But if we do that, again, I'm going to the hinge pin. See, plenty of space. So let's go ahead and move this here. All right, so it's 13, so my other gauge isn't going to fit either. So it's lower than, so that would be 10, so 13.8. So this is less than 13.8. Unfortunately, I do not have anything. Oh, well, this is pretty close. I guess if I measured that, ignore the 4 assumes you're using a block. Wait a minute, that's the same thing. That would be 14. So this is 14, it's the 10 plus the 4. So this is about 13. So between these two cars, there's about a 3 millimeter difference in height, DR10M being lower in the front. So that being said, this is what the car looks like. This is a DR10M. And I mean, let me just show you now the Droop. So if we go into Droop, all right, we're right about there. So let me just put something in here to hold it. All right, so that's the Droop. So it goes from, say, 10 to, so that's the 10. And then right now, I think that's only one turn. Let me see. So remember, this is 14. And then if I count the turns, 1, 2. Right, so that's at 16. So Droop is 16 total. And I'm just measuring the chassis, really, how much it goes up and down. If we look at the DR10, well, DR10 we said was about 13. So let's go ahead and let's see. So this one's going to be, let's see, so. All right, so that's 3 turns. Let's see how it does with 3 turns. Oh, it's still more. Ooh. This one has a lot. All right, so that's 19. I'll do it this way. Oh, wait, this isn't even. There we go. Yeah, DR10, that's quite a bit. The only thing is, though, because the springs are not long enough, just noticing how this does. So this actually droops even more, potentially.
And again, that lighter patch, that's about 1.20 m, which is about 4 feet wide. That's generally what I use as a lane to see how the cars are tracking. If they can stay within that 1.20 m, 4 feet, then I know I'm good. Now, I need to decrease the amount of brake. It brakes too aggressively, and that's why I spin out all the time. Now, something else that I may do in the future, though, is I really do want more droop in the front arms. Some people like it, some people don't. That's for another video, but if you have less droop, it forces the car to stay to the ground. But if you have more droop on hard acceleration, you also have more steering, but it'll send more weight to the back. But we'll see. Maybe I'll get longer shock bodies, which is probably what I'm going to end up doing. Well, I hope this was useful or at least entertaining. Please subscribe if you have not, and I'll catch you in the next one.